Hey, this is Oracleball here. Hey, what's up guys and girls, this is Oracleball here, and today I'm going to be showing you how to synth with Harmless, which is going to be the third video in the How to Synth series, because in the first one we talked about 3XOC, basic synthesis and waveforms. The second one I talked about post-processing, how to make your sound cool, and I made that free 3XOC FLP, where all the sounds were like 3XOC minus a few samples that were used for drums and vocals. But yeah, so this one's gonna be on Harmless, and I picked Harmless because you're gonna use what you learned in the first two videos to understand this synth. But a quick note about Harmless that makes it special is that Harmless is focused on subtractive synthesis. If you remember me talking about that, subtractive synthesis is where you're focused on taking away harmonics in the sound. So when you load up Harmless, this is what you get. You get a saw wave. As you can see, saw wave has a lot of harmonics versus like a sine or triangle wave. If you remember those, they have like no harmonics. Well, the triangle does, but the sine wave is just one harmonic. It's just the pure tone. And subtractive synthesis isn't great for that because there's not much to take away. Where with a saw wave, you can do a lot to it with filters and etc. So now that you understand that Harmless is going to be focused on subtractive synthesis, you're also going to want to know that Harmless is an additive synthesizer that does subtractive synthesis. And you're like, okay, then what's additive? What does that have to do with anything? Well, if you remember, if you load up like a 3XOSC, you do a saw wave. I'll just move this so you can see it. Shut off the other two oscillators. And then you just put it in like a mixer track. Let's do like 50. And then you put in EQ on it. And when you use a filter, you're forcing to take away the sounds. But as you take it away, there's still bleed. I'm going to use an actual low pass. But you can see there's a bleed above the low pass filter. I mean, there is a steep filter that will shut it off. But anyway, the thing with actual filtering is that you're taking away the sound itself, and that's not how Harmless works. And like, okay, but isn't that a low pass filter in Harmless? Well, the thing with Harmless is because it's an additive synthesizer, an additive synthesizer uses all sine waves to make a sound. It isn't like a saw wave. It's actually, I believe, 512 sine waves that are making up a saw wave, because if you remember the sine wave, it's one pure tone. If you ever single out a harmonic in any sound, that harmonic will be a sine wave. So basically any sound can be recreated with sine waves, and that's how additive synthesis works. I hope this makes sense. If not, ask me in the comments. I can try to explain it better. But that's how an additive synth works. It's all sine waves that create the sound. And because Harmless does that, it makes it very powerful, because the filter, when you filter with Harmless, you're not taking away harmonics, you're actually shutting off sine waves. So when you filter and do stuff like that, you're not taking away harmonics, you're shutting them off. And you're going to understand why this is more important when you get into the detune and the phaser and other things, because it's all based off of sine waves and harmonics and messing with the harmonics of the sound, not actually messing with frequencies and etc. So now that I blabbed about that long enough, let's get into Harmless. So I'm just loaded up default because I messed with it a little bit. So when you load up Harmless, you're given this. Got a sine wave with a little bit of low pass on it. But say you want to have something besides a saw wave. Well, if you go here, we're in the timbre, you have your saw wave. But you can go through here, and every choice you have is saw wave. You're like, okay, what about square wave? Well, if you want to get a square wave through Harmless, you load up a saw wave, and you can see right here you have this thing called harmonic mask. Right now it's a saw wave, but if you turn the mix all the way up on a harmonic mask, it's a square wave. Because if you remember me in the first video talking about how a square wave is like a saw wave, except all the even harmonics are shut off. Because you can see in the harmonic mask, like the 2, the 4, and all these even numbers are shut off. That's because those even harmonics are the saw waves. Even harmonics, and when we take them away, it's a square wave. So you just have odd harmonics, which is what a square wave is. And then you turn the mix off, you get your saw wave back, and you can have like a mix of both. So that mix knob comes in pretty handy. And you can mess with each parameter over here in the harmonic mask to change how your sound is. So it could be like whatever you want it to be. You can do something like that. And now that you know how to get a square wave, or actually, before I do that, if you want to load up a waveform into Harmless like you can with 3XOSC, you can just load it up by going to temporary and hitting custom. But if you don't have any saved and you know how to make one with Citrus, you can load up Citrus. And I'll move this a little bit so I can actually grab Citrus. And you move it to a default preset. And don't worry, because I'm going to cover Citrus next if you don't know what I'm doing. But you have, I went to Citrus, loaded up default. I go to operator 1, and with the shape fader here, I can create an oscillator shape. And with the oscillator shape, I created this pulse wave here. And you have to make sure in the oscillator section right here, you have pan, volume, mod, etc. You go to oscillator. Once you have your shape, you click, you left click, you hold, and you can drag it onto the timbre. And now your Harmless has that waveform. You can see it's going to sound the same as Citrus. I'll turn the filter off. And you can see they sound the same. And that's also how you do it with 3XOSC. If I just load up a 3XOSC and move Harmless out of the way. I'm just going to turn off the detach of Harmless because that makes it easier. There we go. You go to your waveform, just left click and drag, and you choose that, the dice, and it'll play the sample that you load up in there. Wait a second. The waveform, my bad. And that's how you get your pulse waveform in 3XOSC. But now that I sidetracked a little bit, I'm just going to delete these synths out of the way. So now that you know how to put your different waveforms in here and how to get a square wave out of Harmless without importing one, let's load it up to default state. And you have, I'm going to start with the equalizer here. This equalizer here, this isn't like a post-processing EQ where you can shape a sound like this. This EQ is a little different. Not because it's a graphic EQ, but it doesn't do the post-process sound. It actually changes the frequencies in your waveform. So you can actually take your saw wave and kind of boost the harmonic EQ or take away. You can see if I can play a really high note and a really low note, and that waveform holds that same characteristic of the second harmonic being boosted and the third kind of pulled down a little bit. That's because the EQ affects the waveform and not like the entire sound. It follows your waveform. And that's how that EQ works. The sub here right here adds harmonics to your waveform. So you just have your saw wave, but if you turn the first one up, it puts a sub harmonic an octave below what you're playing. The second one, I believe, adds the fifth harmonic in musical terms. And the third one, I believe, adds the major third harmonic. Excuse me. The major third harmonic that is an octave above what you're playing. So it's an octave up and then a major third. And that's what that does. I'm going to get to the LHP later because that's going to be important when I'm talking about the phaser and stuff. But down here, you have your attack, decay, and release. And what the attack does, if you ever know your synths, that the attack is how long it takes to get loud. The decay is how long it takes to decay. It creates that pluck sound once you hit. And release is when you let go of a note, and that's how long it takes to quiet down after you let go of a note. You can crank it way up so it's more obvious. I let go. As you can see, it just creates that sustain effect, or release effect, because that's what it is. And then the pluck is just a fast way of creating the volume pluck. And if you see the velocity thing here, if you click the velocity button and you have like a piano roll, when you mess with the velocity, which is below the notes, it'll affect the parameters that you set with whatever you link it to. So the attack, velocity, release, pluck. Mess with these parameters. That's what the velocity does. Let's get back to Harmless. The LFO, I'll talk about this later. Oh, and the phase is the phase randomness and the starting position of your waveform that you choose. You can just play with that to get interesting sounds. I'm going to turn all these off. The volume here is obviously loudness and quietness. That's pretty obvious. The pitch is the pitch of your instrument. I can go up 2 octaves, and I can go down 2 octaves. Put it back to normal. The detune is interesting here. Now, if you look at the detune, what it does is it'll keep your harmonic, your tonal harmonic, the note you're playing where it is, but it pushes the other harmonics around. And it can do this with ease because Harmless is an additive synthesizer. So if you look at this, you can see it just pushes the harmonics and actually kind of creates like a bell tone. So if you actually had like a pluck, you just see the pluck and the detune, you can easily get like a bellish tone. It'll sound good with delay and reverb. Let's put this back to normal. And then the grit. If you look at the harmonics, you can see it's pushing the harmonics. It like squeezes them or pushes them out. The vibrato is vibrato, as you can tell. The LFO will move the pitch. How far you move it is how hard it will go in the direction. And the LFO, which is right here, you can change the speed to make it go faster or slower. And the attack is the volume, just like on the oscillator here for the saw wave. That's how loud the LFO is, or how hard it will be doing it when it starts. You can change the waveform from a sine wave into a saw wave and all these different waveforms. And now that you know what the LFO is, and you can do that to the pitch, anything that says LFO, like the mix level here, it's going too fast. As you can see, it'll modulate the mix level between the saw and the square wave harmonic or whatever you make for the harmonic mask. That's the LFO does there. And anything you see in LFO here, like the low pass filter, you can get an LFO right here. and anywhere else you see that. And now that you know what that is, I'm going to look at my notes I wrote down so I don't skip anything. Let's talk about the Unison. Now, if you remember Unison in 3xOSC, how it works, you just copy and paste the waveform, and how many voices you have is how many copies of it you have. And, well, in 3xOSC, you didn't have an option of how many voices you can. But with Harmless, you can by in the Unison. If you go to the order and you move it up, you can go up all the way up to 9 voices, which is copying and pasting that sound you have 9 times. And the pan will spread out the voices in the stereo field. And if you have it all the way down, it's mono. If you have it all the way up, it's going to be like spread all the way through the stereo field. And usually finding a nice balance in between will work. The pitch is how much pitch variation there is in the clone. So if you have it all the way down, it's not going to do anything because it doesn't give it won't put the copies out of phase. So they're all phased on top of each other. So it's not doing anything. But with a little bit of pitch difference, you start to get the sound because the different copies are out of phase. And instead of doubling up over each other, they're actually moving and creating the Unison effect. And for a supersaw, you just move the pitch up. And just have Unison voices. If you ever hear the word supersaw, all it is a detune saw wave. It doesn't matter how many voices or how much pitch variation there is. It's just a detune saw wave, and that's a supersaw. And in the phase, changes the phase of the clones of the cloned Unison voices. And the variation is how much variation there is in these parameters. If you want to be a little more random, and you can link the Unison pitch to velocity. So the softer you hit a note, the less pitch difference, but the harder you hit, more pitch difference. I should actually turn off the velocity linked to the amp, which is the volume. So it's easier to tell. Yeah, but if you want to take velocity away from volume, you just turn it off the amp, which is volume. And you can turn on the pitch. So the harder you hit the velocity, more pitch difference, but the softer, less pitch difference. And that's how that works. So now, in Unison, you can go through different modes, like blurred's the one you comes with. You can try uniform, classic, and then blurred, which is what it comes with. And you can just go through and see what you like. Let's talk about the filter next. The filter, it has right here on the left, as you can see, the attack, decay, and amount is basically sustain, which will how high up this will affect. So if I turn the filter all the way down, and it's already doing stuff because of the amount. If I don't have the amount anywhere, it's not going to do anything, but how high up is how the attack decay envelope will affect it. And right here, these parameters here, so at the attack, the farther right you have it, it's going to have more of a shape like this. And then the lower you have it, it's going to be more of that shape. And then it does the same thing on the other side for the decay. If you look here, when you have it to that side, it's going to be like this shape. And then the other side is going to be more a different shape. That's what that does. It changes the shape of the attack and the decay. The amount is how much. And again, you can link it to velocity. And if I just load up a default Harmless, so I can just mess with this filter and link the LFO to it. To link the LFO, I can turn this all the way right, bring the frequency down, so I know that the volume of my LFO will modulate up and down, because if you have this all the way up, it's not going to do anything, but if you move it to the left side, it'll do something. But for me, it just makes more sense to have this down and this up. And the keyboard tracking will make your low pass filter follow your keys that you play. So if I have keyboard tracking engaged at 100%, you'll get something like this. As you can see, the low pass filter kind of follows the note, but if I don't have the keyboard tracking enabled, the low pass will stay where it is and cut off the notes in the same spot, as you can see. So that's what keyboard tracking does. It kind of follows the keys so they have like an equal amount of harmonics. The width is how much the low pass filter will cover. And then lower it is, the skinnier, the bigger, the more it's going to cover. As you can see. And then resonance, remember, accentuates the cutoff point of the filter. So if you crank it hard, and again, the pluck here is kind of, just turn this off. Wherever you move the filter frequencies and you have the resonance cranked, you're gonna hear the resonance sound. You can offset the resonance from where the filter cutoff is with this offset knob. So your cutoff point is going to be a different spot than where the resonance is, because you can push it forward or behind your cutoff point. When you have it too far out of the filter, it's not going to do much. But if you have it closer to where the filter is, it'll be more obvious. Or if you have it behind the filter, it's going to do a lot. And the OSC kind of makes the resonance have an FM oscillation to it. I'm not exactly sure what it does, but you can hear that it kind of has that FM characteristic. When you turn on the oscillator, it sounds like it's making the resonance point oscillate against itself, which is interesting. And then, of course, you can change the filter types like you see as I went through the filter in EQ. You have your low pass, band stop, high pass, all those, and variations of them. You even have this cool one called the phaser, because remember how I tell you the phaser is just a bunch of band stops? If I turn a resonance off and you look at the EQ, you can see it's just a bunch of band stops. And you can actually control, the cool thing about the phaser filter is you control the movement of the phaser versus a plug-in phaser that's always in movement. You can actually stop and move it wherever you want to your heart's desire. So that's pretty cool. So now that we went through the filter, and you can also change resonance types, you can experiment to see if you like any of that. And of course you have different modes. Because Harmless, like I said, is an additive. It's a subtractive synth with an additive synth engine. The octave and hertz just changes how the filter will react and other things like the phaser when I get to that. Because when it goes by octaves, it'll go by musical terms, but if it goes by hertz ratios, it's going to be different because they can do that because Harmless is additive. I'm terrible at explaining this. I know, I'm sorry. But if you ever want to know exactly what this stuff does, you can read it in the manual so you understand it. But honestly, if you just play with it and mess with it, you kind of learn what it does without exactly knowing what it is. But you can just experiment with those. I usually always leave it on octave because that's works for me. But you can experiment and see what you like. And now if we move on to the phaser, I'm just going to move the low pass up so you can hear the saw wave. The phaser is going to do what you think a phaser does. The mount is the mix level. The speed is how fast. The offset will offset the starting position of the phaser. The width is how much band stops you can have in a phaser. So lower values, less band stops. A higher value, a lot more band stops, as you can see. Which is pretty neat. And if you remember the keyboard tracking from the low pass filter, the keyboard tracking does the same thing for a phaser. So kind of make it follow your keys instead of if you have it off, it'll just keep moving where it was. You have different modes for the phaser. If you look at I'll just load up a default patch quick. just saw wave. And if I turn up the phaser mix, you have your classic, triangle, and all these different phaser modes. And it's all awesome that you can just do the mix level on the phaser, because how Harmless works, it's an additive synthesizer. It's just wonderful that it does that. It's because you have control of the harmonics, and you got to remember that these filters and everything are manipulating the harmonic, the sine wave voices. It's not actually taking away or anything. You're actually just shutting off harmonics or controlling the individual harmonic itself, which is why it's so powerful. But you can mess with these different phasers and stuffs, which is all really cool. Now, if we go to the Harmonizer copies and pastes harmonics. So how this works is, say you have your saw wave, and if you turn this on, as you can see, the higher harmonics kind of get louder. Because how the Harmonizer works, it'll copy and paste the harmonics you have and then paste them an octave up, or whatever you set the octave to. You can do it like an octave above an octave up, or 2 octaves up, and you can do harm up, or copies and paste the harmonics in a different way. These all just do it in a different way. The amount is the mix level of the Harmonizer. The width is how far up it goes or far down. And the strength is how loud the harmonics are. And again, you can link an LFO to the width to get some cool stuff. Just to experiment and try something. And you see this thing that says final here. What the final means is that after all this processing that we did, we started with the waveform, we shaped the waveform, then it goes through a filter, then the phaser, and then the harmonizer. Final means it's going to take everything here that it just went through and then copy and paste the sound that's coming out of the phaser and the low pass and whatnot. But if you put it before the filter, what it means is that the filter will affect your harmonizer, but if you had this in final, it's going to be copying and pasting after their low pass filter. So you have your low pass filter, but then it sees these harmonics and copies and pastes them after it because you put it on final. It's also going to do the same thing to your pluck and your phaser, but if you set it like pre-phaser, you're still going to be copying and paste the low pass, but if you enable the phaser will affect the harmonizer. Whether if you just have it final, it's going to be copying and pasting after all this post-processing you did. And that's why that's pretty neat. You can change where the harmonizer is in the routing so you can affect it differently. And again, we talked about the LFO and how that modulates different parameters. And the last but not least thing about Harmless are the effects racks. So I'm just going to load up again a default Harmless. Move it up so you hear the entire saw wave, pull back the pluck. So I can create a pluck, turn up some Unison voices. So I got a supersaw. There we go, supersaw pluck. And the chorus, you have all these different modes. And if you don't know what a chorus is, I'm just doing classic. Classic, this is like a basic chorus, and you turn the mix up. The chorus creates that thick detune sound. Because it's like a really fast delay, but it also moves the pitch of the delayed signal to give it that detuned chorus effect. And that's why you can get a flanger sound out of a chorus, because a flanger is a delay where it just copies your signal and then it moves the speed of the phase of the signal to create that flanger effect. That's why I have a flanger in a chorus. You can get this cool vibration. I move the filter. I think the vibration is actually a really cool chorus preset they have. But yeah, you have the chorus, you have your delay, which is self-explanatory. And you have your reverb. You got different choices. You can change the mix level or volume of the reverb. Last but not least, compression. And then we got a mix level of your compression. And then you have a distortion, which actually distorts your sound. It's probably a little too much. You can see you already got like a trance synth with Harmless within 2 seconds of work. I didn't even touch any of these filters right here. It's just the pluck, Unison, and effects rack, and you got like your trance lead. But yeah, so that's how you use Harmless. I hope this made sense. I apologize for getting into a lot of detail at some parts trying to explain things, but I really hope I can make sense of that. Again, if you want to get into the nit-grit stuff, look at the manual so you know exactly how something's working. But yeah, this is how you use Harmless. I hope you understand additive synthesis now. If you have any questions about additive synthesis, please let me know, because when I get into Harmor, which is what I'm going to do last, that's the most important thing to understand, that it's all about control of the individual harmonic. It's all sine wave voices that you're messing with, basically. But yeah, that's how you use Harmless. If you haven't watched the first video or the second video, I highly recommend you do, because that would clear up a lot of things if you don't understand what I'm talking about right now. And yes, thank you for watching. If questions, comments, anything, please leave it in the comments and I'll take a look. I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. And please leave a like if this helped. I appreciate it. Subscribe for more content like this, and I hope you have a nice day. Thank you.